What is worship? Hello, I'm Kyle Whittington, and I am announcing a new video series that I'm going to be doing in which we're going to explore the meaning of the word worship. A little reason why is that I've noticed that in conversations with Catholics and Protestants, we're often using different meanings of the word worship. So whenever Protestants will criticize Catholics and say, "Oh, you worship Mary," well, what we do for Mary, we normally wouldn't qualify as worship. So we're going to get into that. So see if we can come up with a concise definition of worship from the Catholic perspective. Now, just a few expectations for this video series. I'm going to be asking friends, priests, anyone who's willing to take my call that I think could add value to this conversation. I'm going to try to upload an installment every week, but please be merciful in those expectations because I am a married man, father of 4 small children, so I'm going to have bigger priorities on my time. I'm going to be perfectly open to resource recommendations. So I'm talking books, articles, podcasts, someone that you know that would be willing to talk to me, willing to discuss this with me, and just whatever else may come. At the end of the series, I do hope to have a pretty solid definition of the word worship from the Catholic understanding. Now, those of you from a more Protestant tradition might disagree with that definition, and that's fine because what it'll serve as is a starting point for a conversation. This is the accurate Catholic understanding of the word worship, and here's why I disagree with it, and you can just move on from there. Now, I'm also not an expert. This video series is truly an exploration because I have no idea. I've got a little bit of an idea, but I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority. And legitimately, this series could be ended in the next installment just by somebody saying, "Oh, hey, check out this right here, and that answers your question. All you had to do was look here." And hey, there we go. So, a little bit of background of why I'm interested in this conversation. I was recently at a conference here locally to where I live, and there was this guy up on the stage. He had the ripped jeans, he had a guitar, his name was Kyle. I mean, he just hit everything. And at one point, he said, "Let's worship." And he started strumming his guitar and he started singing a praise and worship song. And I don't know, it just kind of struck me as weird. He said, "Let's worship." And I was just thinking, now hold on. If you strumming that guitar and singing about God is worship, then what's the difference between you strumming that guitar and singing about Mary? Would that be worship? And it just kind of got me thinking, what is the nature of worship? And then, perhaps even a bigger question that, honestly, it's probably one of those core issues of society today, and that is, can we take anybody with the name Kyle seriously? And I have my doubts. So, what does it mean to worship God? Or what is it that we owe God? I went ahead and, went for the low-hanging fruit and just went to the Merriam-Webster definitions, and I pulled the first 2 definitions that I had online. And the first definition is to honor or show reverence for as a divine being or supernatural power. Okay. The second is to regard with great or extravagant respect, honor, or devotion. Well, especially with that second definition, whenever you read some of the Marian prayers and, you talk about Marian devotion, well, it's like, okay, well, that seems to fall under the category of worship. But that's not how we would use that in the Catholic sense. We wouldn't necessarily consider that as worship. Would that be a part of worship? Absolutely. But that's not the only thing that makes it worship. So oftentimes whenever we get into these subjects, you quickly learn that the English language is terrible. It's awful. In fact, the word worship itself comes from an Old English word. Let's see here. I'll give it my best shot. It's werthskipe, which Okay, all right. But that basically what you get out of that is worthship. So, older English traditions, you would refer to the mayor of a town as his worship the mayor, or a magistrate in the court, you would call him your worship as opposed to your honor, which is something that modern day Americans would be a little bit more familiar with. But obviously, just by calling the mayor your worship, nobody's putting him on the same level as God. So, in that original sense of the word, worship doesn't seem to be strong enough of word for what we owe God in religion. So, what is that? In Latin, you've got two different words. You've got latria and dulia. Dulia would be veneration. That's what we give to the saints. That's what we give to Mary. Latria is reserved only for God, and that is what we would typically call worship in the modern sense of the word. So, one thing that I'm really interested in finding out in this series is, when do you cross that threshold? At what point does it stop being dulia and it's now latria? So for instance, in the context of the saints and Mary, at what point does that devotion, does that veneration cross that line, and you're no longer just merely venerating, but you're committing idolatry or something like that? Honestly, I feel like it's most appropriate to focus on latria. At what point do you cross into latria? So, like I mentioned earlier, I am open to suggestions. So if you have any of those, please leave them in the comments. And I look forward to hearing from you. And I am excited to get started on this journey. My name is Kyle Whittington. God bless.